For those of you that teach specials classes like gym or art or music or foreign language, classroom management can have some unique challenges. But classroom management is maybe even more important in a specials class, or just as important at least, as it is in a regular classroom. So we're excited to dive into some classroom management tips specifically for specials teachers. Well, welcome back to the Teach for the Heart podcast, where we tackle teaching challenges from a biblical perspective. Why are we here? Because we don't believe that our spiritual walk and teaching profession should exist in two separate domains. Rather, the hope we have in Christ should change how we approach everything, not just at home, but at school as well. So join us as we explore both the spiritual and practical sides of key teaching challenges, integrating them together so we can succeed at teaching, glorify God, and make a lasting difference in our students' hearts and lives. This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. We want to thank our sponsor, Dordt University. Get your Master of Education from Dordt University and learn alongside fellow Christian educators in Dordt's 100% online program. Choose from 7 specializations and complete coursework that is immediately applicable to your school setting. Dordt's program is known for its practicality, affordability, and faith integration. Lock in 50% off your first course when you visit teachfortheheart.com/Dort. That's teachfortheheart.com/DORDT. I'm joined today by Sarah Humes, one of our Teach for the Heart team members and Teach for the Heart Plus mentors. Sarah, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So today we're talking specifically about classroom management tips for specials teachers. And we talk a lot about classroom management on this podcast. And I will say probably 98% of what we talk about in relationship to classroom management applies to specials teachers. I just kind of want to put that out there first. We are not just, if I were going to give like my top 5 tips, these actually wouldn't be them because they would apply things that apply to everybody and that we talk about all the time here on the podcast. If you are a specials teacher, after you finish this episode, go and listen to a ton of the other episodes because all of that pretty much applies to you too. But we wanted to take some time here today to talk about some pieces of advice that are specifically for specials teachers, because specials teachers have a little bit of different situations and some things that are a little bit different, sometimes a little bit tricky, that we definitely wanted to address. And Sarah, can you share with everyone a little bit about your experience as a specials teacher?
Sure. So I taught K through 12 Spanish. And while my high school Spanish was the typical, I had them every day, I had my kindergarten through middle school students on a very short time frame, sometimes only a half an hour, depending on the age group, once a week. And so I love teaching Spanish and I wanted to get as much in as I could. So, and since we're speaking a foreign language, because I teach in Spanish, I needed to make sure that my students understood my procedures quickly, concisely, and they knew what was happening the minute I walked into that door.
Yes, right. You don't have time to waste in a specials class. So that's super, super
Yes.
important. So we're going to kind of dive into some of our key tips here. So our first recommendation is don't fall into the fun class trap. And what I mean by that is sometimes in a specials class, especially the kids, but honestly, sometimes us as teachers too, we can kind of fall into this trap of where the kids think, oh, this is a fun class. I don't really need to listen. And sometimes they think I don't even really need to behave. And then as a teacher, sometimes we could think, well, if procedures aren't as important because class is supposed to be fun, right? Or like I'm in the gym. Like, we don't need procedures. We can run around and be crazy. And there's an aspect, yes, we might want to have fun, or yes, there might be you get to run around more in gym class than you do in, math class. That's for sure. But the truth is that structure is really important in order to be able to make the class fun and also to teach the things you're wanting to teach. You need structure, you need procedures, and you need good classroom management. So it's not, well, to make this fun, I don't need this. It's like, no, I need this to make it fun.
Yeah, and I just have to throw in there because I'm as a as a kid, I was like, and safe because I always liked to feel safe in gym class. I did not want to get
Yes.
hit. But also, one of the other things is, especially if you are teaching with a biblical worldview, it helps so much to think about what the end goal of your class is. When I was teaching Spanish, I would tell my younger students the whole purpose of us learning Spanish right now is so that we can praise the Lord in another way. And boy, did they love that. They just loved to think about a new way to praise the Lord. And my older students, sometimes they wouldn't necessarily have buy into that. And that really, I mean, it did make me sad, but that's the fact with older students sometimes. But I did tell them that, and they would agree with me that all people matter. And so I made it my goal that by the end of Spanish 2, they could sit down by someone that they did not know who is maybe looking really sad or really broken, and that they could tell them how important they were in Spanish. And so knowing that we had a biblical mindset, a biblical worldview made such a difference to my students. And so we would focus on how to move closer to those goals. And with that in mind, it made me so much more likely to adhere to my classroom management plan. And, sometimes we need an intrinsic goal to stick to that and, not necessarily be the fun class, if you will. So that really, really helped me.
I love that. Yeah, thinking about why do we study this subject or why do we take time for this special? What's the goal in it? And not losing sight of that, right? Not letting that fall by the wayside. And that could be really, really motivating. That's great. So the second thing that we thought about was so first of all was don't fall into the fun class trap. Recognize this class is important and we need to have structure in order to be able to make it both fun and productive and safe. Number two is this: recognize that you are probably going to have to work a little bit harder on your procedures. So, first of all, I would say make sure you have good procedures. Sometimes, as a specials teacher, you can think, I don't need procedures, but you really, really do. And you actually need them maybe more. So, because you only have such a limited amount of time, and it can really get wasted if you're wasting it with just some of these procedural things that a procedure would really shorten it up. The second thing is you don't see your kids as often. So that means you're going to have to probably work on procedures longer into the year. So, a typical classroom teacher, by the end of week 1 or 2, most of the procedures are pretty well down, but you may have only seen kids once or twice in that amount of time. So you're going to have to keep working on them longer because you don't see them as often, and also because that's longer for them to forget. So you're just going to recognize that, accept that. And then number three, tip is to keep things simple. So you can't have as complicated of procedures and expectations because they're not going to remember them from week to week and you don't have time for it. So we need to keep things as simple as possible so that students can easily remember, oh yeah, when Mrs. Humes comes into the room, this is what we do. Or, when I come into the music room, this is exactly what happens. And so it's really easy for them to know and learn relatively quickly what's expected of them. And Sarah, I know you have a lot of advice in this area because you have lived this.
Yes. So, and I've lived it in both the traveling teacher way and when kids come into my classroom way, which I think is unique. And not a lot of teachers have gotten to experience both ways. And so I loved when I go into the elementary classroom way. I would say, okay, I'm here. What do we need to do? And they would automatically know. They clean off their desks and it's only their hands on their desk. And we talked about that for weeks, as you said, when I come in. And I would use some whole brain teaching there. We would say it together: everything off my desk, hands on my desk, everything off my desk, hands on my desk. And we'd say it together while they were doing it just to get that ingrained in their minds. And they would do it as I was coming in, not as, while we're waiting, we would do it as I was coming in because every minute mattered. And then I always thought that very purposeful transitions so that we were moving into the language as fast as we could because I wanted those kids to hear and speak Spanish as much as they could. Now, some of it, they might not know what it was yet, but they were hearing the language. And so we would pray in Spanish, simple prayers. And then we would practice our Bible verse. And they had it in English and Spanish. we would practice our primary verbs. Those were how we transitioned into the class. And then we did go back to English just for 90 seconds of slides about what we were going to do that day. And then we went back to our slides. But that did take a lot of work, having that prepared for every age group, every class. I had templates, but those templates took time to prepare in the summer. And so, yes, it is a lot of work, but it paid off because my students knew what was happening and I could teach students in kindergarten in a foreign language. That was pretty cool. That took some practice though. Like that was not easy for me my first year. And so in my second year, it was hard. And so I was thinking, how could this translate to other classes? And so I was thinking about art. Art is a hard one because you have them for such a short period of time. You have cleanup, you have setup, and so I was just thinking, like, remember, like, you could have procedures that you could even write once, have them on slides. Remember, when we work with clay, we have mats below us. We have tools that only touch the clay, not other students. We wash our hands immediately after. Your sculptures dry here, your tools go here, your mats go here. Use pictures, have students repeat you. Um, One of the things that I learned from Linda, and Linda, I'm forever grateful for you for this, is giving the instructions quickly and having the students repeat you. Those two things have helped so much because sometimes we think if we give them slowly, it'll give them a chance to process it. All those kids do in between those instructions is talk. If we are giving them quickly, having them repeat us, it goes so much better. And that is just one of those tricky things that takes practice and someone telling us to learn. It's so important. Like we just don't expect it. Um, and then hand motions, if you can put hand motions, this was something I was thinking about for gym and music teachers. If you can get hand motions involved in your instructions, so good. I can remember instructions from when I was in first and second grade that still involve hand motions. And I am not that young, you know? So if you can still remember them from 35 years ago, that is a really good thing. That's involving all your senses, all your motor skills. That's a really big thing. Um, so it does make a big difference when you invest that upfront time in doing that. And I just want to put it out there that a lot of the ways I learned what procedures were important were from the Teach for the Heart course. It's 50 procedures that will save your sanity. And it did save my sanity and it helped my classes become so much more effective, I believe. And I had asked Linda, I'm like, is it okay if I mention that? Because it is that was a pivotal one for me because it was fast and quick. And I learned so many things that made a difference in how I was running my classroom and what really mattered.
Yeah, I love hearing that. I love that little course. It's still available if you want to check it out. It's at teachfortheheart.com/procedures. And it was just a lot of the procedures that I learned just collected from a lot of people. Some of them come up with myself, but a lot of it was collected wisdom from mentors and other
Mhm.
teachers that spoke into me and just kind of learning what are some things that work in a classroom and just kind of prevent issues from happening in the first place. So yeah, lots of great ideas over there. You can check that out over there. So thank you, Sarah, so much for giving those examples. I hope this is helping you realize that like procedures are really important. They're worth investing in. They're worth kind of just continuing to tweak, right? And you can continue to learn and improve in them. This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. And I have to tell you, I just went to a Herzog event last week, and it was just amazing to see how much God is doing in education at large, but specifically at the Herzog Foundation. They are really pouring into particularly Christian schools, in an incredible way. And if you're teaching at a Christian school, you should definitely be checking them out. In particular, take a look at their amazing lineup of free trainings. I mean, even lodging and meals are included for free. So you definitely don't want to miss that. Another resource that everyone can enjoy no matter where you teach is their Faith and Freedom 250 video series, which tells stories of faith, sacrifice, and courage from America's history. So please check out these and so many more resources at herzogfoundation.com. That's herzogfoundation.com. Now back to our conversation. So that brings us to number 3, which is have a plan to deal with misbehavior. Sometimes this is something that we teach all teachers to do, but it's something that I think sometimes as a special teacher, you're like, do I need that? Yes, you really, really do. Once again, you don't have a lot of time. And sometimes you feel handcuffed because it's not even your own classroom, or, I'm not their teacher. I only see them for this. So that's why it's extra important that you've thought of ahead of time, okay, how am I going to deal with various behaviors? And I think that you have some different choices on this. And it really just depends on your situation, your personality, what's going on. So you can have your own systems where it's, when I come into the room or when you come into my room, this is how this is handled. And these are the consequences. And you think of consequences and things that work just within your classroom. So you can
Mhm.
do it that way. And or you can also borrow from classroom teachers. So if there's certain grades where you're like, this classroom teacher, they have an amazing system, and you've talked with them and you're like, oh yeah, if there's an issue with a class, you can just use my system, I'll clip them down, or they can just kind of seamlessly fall into that. You can feel free to experiment with that as well. So just kind of recognize it is more complicated when you have all these different grades, but you also have a unique opportunity to be able to collaborate when it makes sense. And honestly, if it were me, I would not try to collaborate with every classroom teacher because some of those are going to work better than others. But the ones that could, you might consider it. Then you're definitely going to want to have your plan, for your own things. Sarah, any advice on this aspect? I know it's going to be so different. That's why we just say make a plan that works for you. But what thoughts do you have?
I will just say that my favorite one that I ever worked with was the set of third and fourth grade teachers that I worked with. So I taught third and fourth grade together, and the kiddos came with a little sheet of paper, and the third and fourth grade teachers said, please write down anyone that was not doing your top three, which mine were always, the behaving as if everyone in this classroom mattered, that you were interested in hearing what other people and myself had to say, and, keeping your hands to yourself. And if they were not following those top three rules, then their name went down on that paper, and I don't know what the classroom teachers did, but they wanted to know. And that was just wonderful. Like, I had 30 minutes, so I didn't have to spend my 30 minutes worrying about discipline. They just knew, oh, my name went on the paper. Whatever happened afterwards was not on me. And I mean, I know that whatever, but it just kind of felt nice to know that there was that procedure there already in place. And I really had thought about lobbying for that for all of the grades, because it was a really, really nice way of handling it. And they were great. They were such wonderful supports.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense. Like when it works, it makes sense because those classroom teachers, if you're working with kids that are in a self-contained classroom where they have
Yeah.
them all day, they already have systems in place for what happens when kids misbehave, whether it's whatever it is, they already have that, and you only have them for that short amount of time. So being able to enfold into that system can work really well. So if that's something you've never tried, maybe start with a teacher that you think would be the best fit, experiment with it there, and then see if you can expand it out to some
Yeah.
other classes. Yeah. And if you need help thinking through all of this, we have Classroom Management 101, which is all about helping you kind of put together that plan, thinking it through, and all these different aspects. So you're always love to have you guys join us at teachfortheheart.com/CM101. And if you use the code podcast, you'll get a discount on your enrollment. So, our last area we want to talk about, obviously, there's so much we could talk about, but the last one for today is having to do with building relationships. And obviously, any teacher, once again, we would tell you build relationships with your student. That's really important. But it can be extra tricky in specials when you only see them for half an hour a week or, 20 minutes twice a week. It can be extra tricky to build relationships. So, a few tips though for how you might do this. Number one, simply being passionate about what you're teaching helps build relationships. When they see you're the crazy Spanish lady, but you're all about it. That really helps. They're like, okay, I'm in. That's really important. Number two, talk to the kids, right? Just take opportunities that you don't have to spend hours and hours doing this, just talking to them as you come in, as there's just taking advantage of those little opportunities when you see them in the hall. Bond over your subject with kids that love it. If you're an art teacher, there are
Yes.
kids in your class that love art. Find them. Go. It's okay to give them a little bit of extra attention. There's some kids that are never going to do anything with art, but those kids, there's really opportunity to mentor them and really speak into their life. They might not be good at other subjects, but this is the one they are. So, look for that, whatever your special is for those kids. And you can also bond about non-school related things. You can just talk about life, talk about, things that are interesting. You can also connect with them outside of class. And I'll just give one example, a little bit of a shout out to my kids' gym teacher. She was a gym teacher there for a couple years, and she just was so good at this, at building relationships with kids. And because of her family situation, she had the time to be able to come to a lot of their games. She would come to games, she would be involved. That would
Oh,
make such a big difference. But one of the little things she did that I know took time, but I think the way she did it, I don't know how she did it. She must have had some type of system, because she would write little notes to the kids that would say, I'm praying for you, or I noticed this about you. Like, and it would be very specific. I noticed you, and she would mention something that was unique to them,
oh,
and send it home. And I don't know, I don't know what that meant to them, but that meant a lot to me. I'm like, wow, this teacher really
yeah.
cares. She's involved. She's just the gym teacher, quote unquote. I'm doing air quotes here. But no, she's using that opportunity to make a really big impact. And when she left, she was severely missed, and she actually ended up coming back. She's going to be back this year as a classroom teacher, and everyone's super excited because she had that kind of impact on kids, just by kind of making that effort.
Wow, that is so special. Um, but yeah, I totally agree, especially about being passionate about what you teach. I think that that shows kids that it is okay to love learning, first of all, and it sets them free, even if they're not crazy about the subject that you're teaching. It sets them free to love what they're passionate about. And in today's world, they need that. They need to know that it's okay to be passionate about whatever they're passionate about. Um, and just relationships in general, it can be a pretty lonely world. And just knowing that someone cares about them is just so huge. Um, I think of all that, I was a big high five and sticker fan when I was in the classroom. And I gave out probably thousands of stickers and maybe close to a million high fives. I don't know. But to this day, if I see one of my students out out and about, they'll wanna high five me, and it just, it means the world to me, and I love that, and I hope it means the world to them. I hope they think about how many high fives that they got from me, and, those relationships aren't just beneficial for them. They come back and they're blessings to us too, and it's just an honor to get to teach our kiddos. So,
Yeah, that's so neat. And I love how you found something that you connected with and was like your thing, the high fives. So I guess I encourage you guys to like find something that's your thing. Not, that one teacher was writing the notes. So it's just different, and you don't have to do everything. No one can do everything, but finding those things that are your thing, your way to connect with students is really valuable. Sarah, any final advice that you'd give special teachers as we wrap up this episode?
don't be afraid to connect with other special teachers in the classroom teachers, cross curricular, like sometimes it helps to build those relationships and say, hey, let's do Spanish and art projects together and show them how important these things really are and how what you learn in Spanish can be connected to your history class or your art class or I just love how they all work together, and when we can show our students that, it is just amazing.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing those thoughts. And thank you guys so much for being here with us today. We hope that you've enjoyed this episode and that you found it helpful for us. This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. All views and opinions are our own and don't necessarily reflect those of the Herzog Foundation. If you enjoyed this episode, if you can like and subscribe, share it with a friend, leave a review, all the things, those really are super helpful to help more people find the podcast. And we'd love to be a blessing to more teachers. Well, thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to being with you again soon. In the meantime, teacher, remember, God is at work in you and through you, and He's using you to make a difference. Keep your eyes on Him and teach for the heart.